Sit down, you long-haired girl, before I take care of this my way. Teacher Diane Fletcher's voice cut through the stuffy air of Riverside High School. With a sharp tug, she dragged Jasmine Carter across the chair, digging her fingers into her scalp. "You're always testing the limits, aren't you?" he mocked, pulling the girl's hair so hard that her eyes filled with tears. The scissors gleamed in the air. "Caught!" A thick lock of hair fell onto the cold school floor. The sound was followed by murmurs of astonishment. "Now that's presentable," Diane said disdainfully. Jasmine didn't cry. She didn't beg. She just stood there, her jaw clenched and her eyes fixed ahead, recording every second of that humiliation. Professor Fletcher had no idea that she had just committed a crime against the only student capable of destroying her career and her peace. Before we continue this story, please comment on which city or country you are watching from. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time. This is just the first twist in a story that will surprise you. The shrill ringing of the morning bell echoed through the hallways of Riverside High School, announcing the start of another day. Jasmine Carter settled into her usual seat in Ms. Diane Fletcher's English class, the third row from the front, right in the center. She had chosen that seat carefully months before, close enough to show interest, far enough away to escape the stares that scrutinized her more than listened to what she was saying. The room vibrated with its usual morning energy, muffled laughter, papers being flipped, whispers about the weekend. In the corner, Professor Diane organized her materials with military precision. Pressed blazer, impeccable bun, rigid posture. Today we're going to talk about the symbolism in the short story The Yellow Wallpaper by Charlotte Perkins Gilman, she began. But the explanation was cut short by a freezing stare. The teacher's eyes fixed on Jasmine's hair, a crown of perfectly defined curls, arranged with patience and pride that morning. "Miss Carter," Diane said sharply, "your hair is not in accordance with school rules." The murmuring ceased. Everyone felt as if they were holding their breath. Jasmine's hands instinctively went to her hair, but soon fell onto the table. "Teacher, my hair is clean, tied back, and within the rules," she replied calmly. The firm tone irritated Diane Fletcher, who retorted in a harsh voice, "Go to the coordinator's office, now." Cell phones began to discreetly appear under desks, recording every second. Jasmine felt her heart race, but she kept her voice steady. "With all due respect, Professor, there's nothing wrong with my hair. I want to attend class." The teacher's face flushed. She flung open the desk drawer with a sharp pull. The glint of scissors reflected under the fluorescent lights. "This type of challenge will not be tolerated in my office." The murmuring of colleagues turned into absolute silence. Tyler Bennett, 2 desks ahead, murmured, "Teacher, calm down." But it was useless. Diane leaned over Jasmine's desk. "If they don't follow the rules willingly, I myself will enforce them." A dry sound cut through the air. A thick strand of hair fell onto the open notebook. The sound of the cut echoed like a gunshot. More cell phones were raised. Emma Rodriguez in the front row put her hand to her mouth. Ryan Mitchell started to stand up, but sat back down when he received a sharp look from the teacher. Jasmine didn't scream. She didn't cry. Her mother's words echoed in her mind. "Never let them see you fall apart." She stared at the teacher, her gaze fixed on the fear. Diane's triumphant expression wavered for a moment. Between the two in the notebook lay the severed threads, like evidence of a silent crime. The scent of coconut oil still lingered in the air, mixed with the coolness of the air conditioning. Jasmine's scalp burned, but her posture remained intact. "Perhaps now you'll learn to behave properly," said the teacher, raising her chin with false authority. The silence that followed was almost unbearable. The clock on the wall seemed to have stopped, until hurried footsteps echoed down the hallway. Coordinator Margaret Hayes entered the room, breathless. "What's going on here? We've been receiving calls." She stopped, Horrified, she saw the scissors in the teacher's hand, the mutilated hair on the floor, and the cell phones pointed at that scene that should never have existed. Jasmine calmly gathered her things. She took the severed lock of hair and held it in the palm of her hand, as if she were keeping a piece of herself. It was the hair her grandmother had taught her to care for, the hair her mother patiently combed every morning, a symbol of pride, resilience, and love. As she stood up, her colleagues moved away, as if embarrassment could be contagious. Some were still filming, others lowered their eyes. Margaret Hayes extended her hand. "Jasmine, my dear." But the girl walked on firmly, head held high. The corridor opened up before her like a challenge. Each footstep echoed against the iron lockers. Eyes followed his back like shadows. Even with a heavy heart and pain burning in her scalp, Jasmine Carter kept walking, remembering her mother's words. "Your dignity is armor. Never let it be broken." The morning sun streamed through the windows of the Riverside High School hallway with a merciless glare, too bright, too revealing. But Jasmine Carter didn't hide. He did not lower his head. She walked with firm, measured steps, her body erect like someone who refuses to be expelled from her own space. In the palm of her hand, she held a lock of cut hair, a symbol of something much bigger than that morning. The weight of each comment disguised as correction, of each attitude problem, of each look of disdain that teacher Diane Fletcher cast upon her while praising other students for the same behaviors. Each strand represented an invisible cut that preceded the last one, the one that hurt not only the scalp, but the soul. The hallway seemed endless. Each step felt like a small eternity. But Jasmine kept walking, carefully holding what remained of her curls, as if protecting an essential part of herself. The white lights in the principal's office buzzed like angry wasps. Jasmine sat perfectly upright in the hard plastic chair, her cropped hair resting in her lap. Beside her, Professor Diane Fletcher kept her hands crossed, her face covered by a mask of artificial serenity. On the other side of the table, Director Kenneth Walsh leaned back in his leather chair with the rehearsed air of someone about to resolve the situation. "This is very serious," the director began, his voice heavy with calculated authority. "Professor Diane, please explain what happened in your classroom." The teacher's voice came out trembling, feigning discomfort. "Director Walsh, I was simply trying to maintain discipline. Student Jasmine has demonstrated a pattern of disobedience. When I asked her to conform to the school code, she reacted aggressively. I felt threatened." Jasmine suddenly raised her head. "That's not true. Please don't interrupt, Miss Carter." The director cut her off without even looking at her. "Continue, teacher. She challenged me in front of everyone. I just tried to remain respectful. I've never felt so intimidated by a student." The director nodded, understandingly. "I understand. Your record here at Riverside is exemplary." He flipped through some papers before turning his cold gaze back to Jasmine. "Miss Carter, this type of behavior will not be tolerated. Such seriousness demands action." Jasmine took a deep breath. "She cut my hair without permission. There are videos of it." "All cell phones that recorded what happened will be collected," the director interrupted. "Recording inside the classroom is against school rules." He pressed the phone button. "Linda, please collect the cell phones from Professor Diane's class immediately." Through the glass windows of the secretary's office, Jasmine saw the secretary, Linda Foster, hurrying down the hallway. Within seconds, students began being called in, cell phones were confiscated, and with them any chance that the truth would survive. "These videos don't show the real context," Diane insisted, wiping away fake tears with a handkerchief. "They show exactly what happened," Jasmine replied, her voice firm even though her chest was burning. "You didn't have that right." "That's enough," the principal interrupted, his tone even harsher. "Your rebellion only confirms what the teacher reported. You're suspended for 5 days for insubordination and for creating a hostile environment in the classroom." The injustice hit Jasmine like a physical blow. "She attacked me. She cut my hair without—" "I will not tolerate false accusations against a respected professor," interrupted Kenneth Walsh. "Professor Fletcher will take a short paid leave while we assess the case. You, however, must leave the campus immediately." Outside, students whispered and peeked through the window. The sentences came out distorted, full of assumptions. "She must have provoked it." "Of course," he replied. He made a scene. Jasmine watched helplessly as the truth was rewritten before her eyes, transformed into something more palatable, more convenient. Professor Diane stood up, adjusting her blazer with cynical elegance. "I hope you use this time to reflect, Jasmine. I only want the best for all my students." Jasmine's hands tightened around the strands of hair in her lap, the same hands that had never been raised against anyone before, the same ones who had only held books, pens, and dreams. Director Kenneth Walsh was already filling out the suspension form without looking up. "Security will escort you to your locker. Your parents will be notified." A security guard appeared at the door. Vincent Harper, the same one who used to greet her with a smile during breaks. Now he avoided her gaze, following orders. As Jasmine walked down the corridor, escorted, she realized how precisely the system protected itself. Every glance, every silence, every signature was a well-oiled cog, moving swiftly to erase any trace of the truth. But even under the weight of the absurdity, she kept her chin up. Because what they had tried to take from her, dignity, identity, voice, couldn't fit on a suspension form. The teachers hurriedly led the students back to their classrooms, closing the doors as soon as Jasmine Carter passed. The dry sound of the locks echoed through the hallways, as if they wanted to isolate her, to erase her existence from the environment. The academic coordinator, the same one who a week earlier had praised her essays for the university application, turned into another hallway, pretending to answer a call, unable to look the student in the eye. The most painful thing wasn't the silence. It was the speed with which everyone accepted the new narrative, that she was the problem, the threat, the one that needed to be contained and removed. The act of teacher Diane Fletcher, the explicit violence in front of the entire class, was already being diluted, softened, reinterpreted as a misunderstanding. Security guard Vincent Harper, who weeks earlier had proudly shown off the new watch his daughter had given him, now watched her from a distance, arms crossed. "Come on, Jasmine. Quickly," he said, without looking her in the eye, as if simply following orders. But Jasmine didn't quicken her pace. She put each book away calmly, each notebook page carefully folded, organizing the papers as if this routine were the last way to maintain some control over the chaos. The hallways were empty now. His footsteps echoed coldly against the metal cabinets. Through the classroom windows, she saw curious faces turning around, eyes that followed her in silence, all without cell phones on their desks. The violence of the morning was being erased, both digitally and socially. When they arrived at the main door, Vincent Harper held the door open with a mechanical courtesy. "Wait for your ride here." Then he went inside, leaving her alone on the school steps. Jasmine sat down, her heavy backpack beside her. In his pocket, the severed hair, wrapped in a tissue, lay as evidence of a crime that perhaps no one wanted to investigate. The late morning sun beat down on the steps, illuminating the empty courtyard, while inside a group of administrators spoke in hushed voices, gesturing by the windows, constructing the official version of events. Professor Diane Fletcher's car was still parked in its reserved spot, untouched, protected. A student walked past with a corridor pass, avoiding her gaze. The school pulsed normally behind Jasmine as if nothing had happened. No one came to ask if she was okay. No one apologized. The world went on its way, indifferent. When her mother's car finally arrived, Jasmine stood up with effort. Stiff legs, heavy body, fixed gaze. The pain stemmed not only from what had happened that morning, but from the terrible clarity that now burned in his chest. That was no accident. Outside of permission. Permission granted long ago, and finally exercised. The kitchen clock ticked the same rhythmic sound as always, while the smell of soup filled the air. Nicole Carter stirred the pot distractedly, her gaze lost in the steam rising lazily. I knew no one would eat it. At the table, Jasmine remained motionless, staring into space. From the moment he got into the car, he hadn't said more than 2 words. The afternoon light faded through the window, casting long shadows across the floor. "Daughter?" Nicole said softly, turning down the heat. "Talk to me, please." Jasmine moved her hands slowly until she reached her pocket. From there, he took out the folded tissue. She placed it on the table, between the two of them. With trembling fingers, she unfolded the scarf, revealing the thick lock of severed hair. The dry sound of the wooden spoon hitting the stove echoed through the kitchen. Nicole walked to the table, pulling the chair closer to her daughter. "My love," he whispered hesitantly. "May I touch?" Jasmine nodded silently. The mother carefully lifted the lock of hair, as if holding something sacred, and realized with a shudder of anger that it was exactly that, a test. Without saying anything, she went to the drawer, took out a clear plastic bag, and put the hair inside. "Let's keep this safe." The back door opened. Judge Marcus Carter entered with his robe still draped over his shoulders. One glance at the scene, wife and daughter sitting down, the bag with the hair between them, was enough to make his usual smile disappear. "What happened?" he asked in a restrained, serious voice. Jasmine took a deep breath, and for the first time since morning, tears came. With a trembling voice, she recounted everything. The moment she was called in, the humiliation in front of the class, the sound of the scissors, the confiscation of her cell phones, the unjust suspension. Marcus listened in silence. He didn't interrupt her, only their hands, clasped together on the table, betrayed the fury contained beneath the serenity. When his daughter finished, he asked, "At what time exactly did the teacher interrupt the class?" "At 9:07, Jasmine replied, wiping her face. "I looked at the clock when she called me." "Who was closest to you?" "Tyler Bennett and Aisha Johnson," Jasmine said. "But they're not going to say anything. Nobody will." Silence spread through the kitchen. Outside, the distant sound of cars seemed like the world was continuing on without haste. But in that house, something had changed forever. Judge Marcus Carter looked up, and for the first time in his entire career, he felt that justice could not be contained in a sentence. This time, it would be personal. Was there another adult present when it happened? "No," Jasmine Carter replied hesitantly. "The counselor, Linda Foster, came in later, but she didn't see what happened," Judge Marcus Carter noted calmly. "Has Professor Diane Fletcher ever harassed you before?" Jasmine remained silent for a few seconds. Nicole Carter, standing beside her, reached out and shook her daughter's hand. "Tell me everything, my love." "It started small," Jasmine murmured. "She would call me out when others spoke louder. She'd say I had a bad attitude just for answering questions. Last month, she sent me to the back of the room, alone. She isolated me. She also issued 3 warnings for inappropriate behavior," Nicole added, getting up to open the kitchen drawer. "I kept copies of everything." From there, he pulled out a worn blue folder. Inside were reports, printed emails, and detailed notes. Marcus leafed through the papers carefully. "That's good, very good," he said firmly. Jasmine lowered her gaze. "I should have said that sooner." "No, daughter," Nicole replied firmly. "You did the right thing. You remained dignified and calm, and we kept records. That's how you deal with people like that." Marcus rested his hands on the documents. "Schools like Riverside are counting on families' weariness," he said gravely. "They expect silence or scandal, but they're not prepared for constant, methodical pressure." He looked directly at his daughter. "Things are going to get worse before they get better. They're going to shut down. They're going to try to make you the culprit. Are you ready for that?" Jasmine raised her chin. "Yes, sir." Nicole returned to the stove, turning off the heat under the forgotten pot of soup. "They think that because we're not out there shouting, they've won," she said, looking at her husband. "But they have no idea what's coming next." Marcus looked at the toga hanging there. "My toga." Jasmine stood up to help him remove the black garment. He hung it carefully on the hook by the door, and before leaving the kitchen murmured, "They chose the wrong daughter." The following morning, the sun reflected off the satellite dishes of the press vans parked in front of Riverside High School. Reporters adjusted microphones, cameras flashed, and the flagpole cast a long shadow over the crowd. Inside the school library, which had been improvised as a press room, Superintendent Gloria Patterson, flanked by security guards, arranged papers on the podium. The murmur was constant. Whispers, flashes, murmurs. "Before we begin," Gloria announced, "I'd like to introduce Professor Diane Fletcher's lawyer, Dr. Rebecca Thornton." A woman in a grey suit with an impenetrable posture stepped onto the podium. "Professor Diane has served this district with dedication for over 15 years, he stated. "Yesterday's unfortunate incident occurred after repeated attempts to address a student's behavioral problems. My client felt threatened and reacted defensively in accordance with the school's internal rules of conduct." While the press conference continued, Nicole Carter watched everything from the kitchen, the coffee already cold on the table. The phone vibrated with another anonymous call, the fifth since dawn. She let it ring. On TV, Superintendent Gloria Patterson resumed speaking. "After analysis, we concluded that the case stems from a communication failure regarding our dress code policies. We will initiate cultural sensitivity training for all employees." In the living room, Jasmine watched the comments on social media scrolling by non-stop. "If I had followed the rules, none of this would have happened. These young people don't respect anyone anymore. The teacher was only defending herself." Her phone vibrated. A message from Brianna, her best friend. "My mother said I can't talk to you anymore. I'm sorry." Jasmine dropped her phone on the sofa, her gaze vacant. Hours later, at the federal court for the Southern District, Judge Marcus Carter was reviewing a case when Judge Philip Caldwell, his colleague, knocked on the door. "Marcus, do you have a minute?" He went inside, closing the door behind him with a tense expression. "I heard what happened to your daughter. Terrible situation. But some colleagues are worried about the repercussions." "Further developments?" Marcus repeated in a neutral tone. "Your name is being considered for the Court of Appeals, and you know certain exposures can complicate things." Marcus simply nodded, his gaze fixed on the papers in front of him. "Thank you for your concern, Philip." The dense silence was enough to end the conversation. When Philip Caldwell left the office, Marcus Carter remained motionless for a few seconds. Then he closed the folder in front of him and murmured, in a low but sharp voice, "They think they know the rules, but they haven't seen what happens when the law enters their home." At 2:15 p.m., Nicole Carter's phone rang. On the other end of the line, the soft, rehearsed voice of director Carolyn Brooks rang out. "Mrs. Carter, after reviewing yesterday's events and speaking with the security team, we have decided to extend your daughter's suspension. In addition, she will be transferred to our Alternative Learning Center for the remainder of the semester." Nicole gripped the device tightly. "On what grounds, Director?" The response came wrapped in false compassion. "We want to ensure that everyone feels safe in their learning environment." "You mean Professor Diane Fletcher's environment?" A short silence. Then the director concluded coldly, "I understand you're upset, but the decision is final. The documentation will be sent by email later today." Nicole ended the call and without hesitation called the family's lawyer, Bradley Winters. The secretary transferred him immediately. "They're acting fast," Bradley said after hearing the account. "They want to isolate Jasmine and control the narrative. A classic institutional defense strategy. Marcus will file the civil lawsuit tonight," Nicole replied. "Great. Document everything. Every call, every email, every detail. And Nicole, be careful. These things can escalate quickly." The afternoon dragged on. More press vans parked on the street. Journalists crowded in front of the Carter's house. The comments on social media were becoming increasingly aggressive. After the third car slowed down in front of the residence, Nicole installed a security camera on the porch. Meanwhile, upstairs, Jasmine remained silent, locked in her room. At 6:45 p.m., Judge Marcus Carter was in his office, carefully reviewing the complaint form for violation of civil rights. Every detail had to be perfect. He knew from experience that the system was designed to protect itself and that any slip-up would be used to discredit the entire complaint. The phone vibrated. An unknown number. He answered. "Do you really want to ruin your career over this?" said a digitally distorted voice. "Give up now. Everything will go back to normal." Marcus did not respond. He simply ended the call, noted the time, and attached the record to the case file. At 7:30 p.m., he clicked Send. The formal complaint was filed with the Civil Rights Division of the State Department of Education. The confirmation email arrived seconds later. Case number 2023-114, OCR Division. Upstairs, Jasmine stared at herself in the bathroom mirror. The uneven cut in her hair now looked even more cruel, a visible scar of the violence she had suffered. She ran her fingers through her scalp and remembered the metallic sound of the scissors, the cold feel of the blade, the muffled laughter around her. But the shame had already transformed into something else, a tough, firm force. His father's words echoed in his mind. They chose the wrong daughter. In the reflection, her eyes no longer belonged to a victim. Professor Diane Fletcher had tried to destroy her pride, but unknowingly, she had awakened something that could not be tamed. The phone vibrated with yet another hateful comment. Jasmine deleted all her social media apps without even looking. Let them speak. That I had lied. The truth was kept secret. In the plastic bag with the cut hair, in the meticulous records of the mother, in the firm hands of the father, now moving the gears of power. They thought they were dealing with a teenage girl who would keep quiet. They were about to discover how wrong they were. Jasmine took a deep breath and lifted her chin. Tomorrow, I would return to school, with my head held high, that they might see what they had done. Her uneven hair was now her armor. The following morning, the Alternative Learning Center reeked of cleaning products and reheated coffee. At 7:15 a.m., Jasmine Carter was sitting in a hard plastic chair in front of a stack of forms on a metal table. The fluorescent lights flickered above her, transforming the beige walls into a lifeless backdrop. Coordinator Linda Foster watched her coldly. "Sign here, here, and here," he said, pointing to the papers. "This document confirms your disciplinary status and your commitment to following the unit's guidelines." Jasmine's hand moved slowly. Each signature seemed like a small surrender. Through the fogged windows, I could see other students arriving, tired faces, hard stares. The message was clear. This was not a school. It was confinement. Meanwhile, across town, Judge Marcus Carter was meeting discreetly with civil rights attorney Veronica Sloan at a corner table in the Bayside Coffee House. Between cups of cold coffee and stacks of documents, the plan began to take shape. Because if the system had decided to test the limits of injustice, the Carter family was about to show what happens when a mother, a father, and a daughter decide to fight, with the law, with courage, and with memory. Steam rose from untouched coffee cups as the two conversed quietly in the discreet corner of the Bayside coffee house. "Multiple violations," said Veronica Sloane, spreading the documents out on the table. "Assault, discrimination, tampering with evidence, retaliatory transfer. But what worries me most is the speed. This kind of coordinated reaction indicates a recurring practice." Judge Marcus Carter nodded slowly. "They've done this before, and managed to cover it up." Veronica leaned forward, her gaze steady. "The confiscation of students' cell phones in itself is illegal, and forcing the deletion of the videos, that is systematic destruction of evidence." Marcus kept his voice calm. "They are afraid." "And they should be," Veronica replied hesitantly. "But they also have connections. Superintendent Gloria Patterson's brother is a member of the State Board of Education, and Professor Diane's husband is a business partner of the mayor's chief of staff. This isn't going to be a clean fight." At Riverside High School, Nicole Carter entered through the front door, carrying a box containing her daughter's last belongings. The caretaker, George, stopped sweeping the floor and murmured without looking directly at her, "Ma'am, there are cameras in this hallway. Cameras. They record everything." He lowered his voice. "The security room is behind the cafeteria. The system stores 30 days of recordings, but sometimes, things erase themselves." Nicole simply nodded and continued on her way, her heart racing. A few hours later, social media exploded with the news. Professor Diane Fletcher resigns. The official statement from the school district praised 15 years of exemplary service and wished him success in new professional challenges. The comments multiplied. "A woman who has been wronged. Another professional victim of cancel culture." He did what had to be done. In the office, Veronica Sloane watched the press conference, her tense expression turning to indignation. He picked up the phone to call the judge, but the judge answered first. "Now's the time," Veronica said bluntly. "We can act while they're still disorganized." "They're not disorganized," Marcus replied with ruthless calm. "They're executing a plan. Let them believe they've won. When they feel secure, they'll make mistakes." Veronica leaned back in silence. That was why she had accepted the case, not just for the sake of justice, but to learn from someone who knew the workings of power. At the Alternative Learning Center, Jasmine Carter remained seated alone in room 103. Professor Derek Shaw barely looked up from his cell phone as the students silently filled out mechanical forms. No debate. No learning, just obedience. A girl 2 seats away passed a folded note. "What did you do to end up here?" Jasmine wrote back, "I existed with great intensity." The girl read, smiled sadly, and nodded in understanding. That evening, the Carter family gathered around the dinner table. Nicole had prepared her daughter's favorite dish, salmon with honey and roasted vegetables. The news was playing softly on TV, showing protesters in front of Riverside, holding signs that read, "Justice for Diane." "An exemplary teacher. Enough of the persecution." Jasmine pushed the food onto her plate, showing no appetite. "They're calling this a victory," she said bitterly, as if she were the victim. Marcus maintained a serene gaze. "Let them think that. This stopped being about school the moment she touched you. Now it's about responsibility." "What does that mean?" Jasmine asked. "That means we're not fighting for an apology or for your reinstatement. We're fighting for real consequences, not a dismissal disguised as a promotion." Nicole held her daughter's hand. "Honey, sometimes justice seems like defeat at first. That's how they make people give up. But we won't." Marcus finished with the same cutting calm of a verdict. The more they celebrate now, the harder the fall will be later. Every tweet, every compliment, every sign, all of this will be proof of how the system protects itself. Jasmine looked at her father. Without the toga, he seemed more human, but also more dangerous, like a man who knew how to dismantle structures from the inside. On TV, excited voices celebrated the teacher's victory. But there in that dining room, there was only silence and certainty. They had the truth, they had the evidence, and above all, they had patience. The following morning, the sun streamed through the living room curtains. Jasmine placed her laptop on the coffee table and opened a new folder of documents. The cursor blinked on the screen, awaiting the title. She typed slowly, "Riverside Dossier. What really happened?" And, for the first time since the beginning, she smiled. The news was playing at a low volume, a constant noise that Jasmine Carter tried to ignore, but couldn't. Her hair, still uneven on one side, was held back by a black headband, a makeshift solution for a permanent violation. "Latest news from Riverside High School," the presenter announced. "Former teacher Diane Fletcher has spoken out for the first time since her dismissal." Jasmine's fingers froze on the keyboard. On screen, Diane Fletcher appeared in a softly lit studio, wearing a blue blazer, her face carefully trained to express fragility. "I dedicated my life to teaching," he said, his voice trembling just right. "But the hostile atmosphere made it impossible to maintain discipline. I feared for my safety." Nicole Carter emerged from the kitchen, still holding the dish towel in her hands. "Turn that off." "No," Jasmine replied, without taking her eyes off the screen. "I want to hear what she's saying about me." Diane continued, wiping her dry eyes with a handkerchief. "When students refuse to follow basic rules, when they become aggressive, we, the teachers, are put in impossible situations. The real victims are the other students whose education is harmed." Jasmine's phone vibrated. Messages multiplied on social media. "We always knew you were problematic. Poor teacher. It's shameful to invent lies about an exemplary professional." Nicole snatched the cell phone from her daughter's hand. "That's enough." He blocked several numbers before returning it. The doorbell rang. Through the window, they saw a delivery person leaving a brown envelope on the balcony. Inside, there were printouts of emails exchanged between parents of students. The content, Jasmine's alleged disciplinary record, with old notes, tardiness, a warning for talking back in 9th grade, and a uniform violation from last semester. Nicole leafed through the papers. They are creating an image, trying to assemble a pattern that never existed. Jasmine stared intently at the leaves. How did they manage that? "Illegally," the mother replied, "and we're documenting everything." In the federal court for the Southern District, Judge Marcus Carter was reading case files when his assistant entered, looking tense. "Doctor, I've received a notification from the Judicial Ethics Council." Marcus received the envelope, opening it with surgical precision. The complaint alleged misuse of position for personal gain and requested his removal from any case involving the state's education system. He simply murmured, "What a coincidence." He added the document to the growing pile on the table. The cell phone vibrated. A message from a fellow judge. "Be careful, Marcus. They're digging into your daughter's past. Don't let it destroy your legacy." Marcus took a deep breath. He didn't reply. He simply recorded the message as evidence. In the office, lawyer Veronica Sloan spoke on the phone, her voice firm and urgent. "I don't care what time the server leaves. I want all the preservation requests filed today. Every email, every camera log, every file from the last 6 months." He hung up and called again, this time to Nicole. "They are ramping up the counterattack." 3 more parents have come forward saying that Jasmine threatened their children, retroactive accusations dating from before the incident. Nicole replied immediately, "But the dates don't match the school's visitor records. They're falsifying evidence." "Exactly," Veronica confirmed. "They're building a defense, or rather a fortress." Through the living room window, Nicole watched yet another unfamiliar car slowly pass by the house, for the 3rd time that day. "They're watching us, Veronica." "Document everything," the lawyer replied. "License plates, times, photos, every detail." Late in the afternoon, Riverside High released a brief statement. "A technical glitch affected the unit's security system, making it impossible to access recordings from the last month." Nicole tried calling the caretaker, George, but the call went straight to voicemail. He then called the maintenance department. "Excuse me, ma'am," the secretary replied in a neutral voice. "The employee is on extended leave, personal reasons." Later, Jasmine looked up from her laptop as another car slowly drove by on the street. "Mom, why aren't you angry?" "I am," Nicole replied, sitting down beside her. "I'm furious. But anger isn't a strategy. Your father taught me that they want us to be impulsive, emotional, to make mistakes." Jasmine took a deep breath. Nicole held her hand. "That's why we don't react. We record. Every lie, every misstep, every manipulation." The mother's gaze hardened. Every lie they tell is another brick in the wall that will collapse on them. And in that instant, between the distant sound of the television and the silence that hung over the house, Jasmine Carter understood that the war had changed phases, and that their revenge would be made of evidence, not screams. As night fell over the city, Judge Marcus Carter's security team reported unusual activity. Cars discreetly followed him from the federal court, cameras capturing photos of the vehicle and the person driving it. Nothing overtly threatening, but the message was clear: we are watching. When he arrived home, later than usual, Marcus checked every lock, every window, every gate, with the methodical precision of someone who already knew how fear worked. The house, once a refuge, now resembled a besieged fortress. Through the living room window, the headlights of a slowly passing car illuminated the family portraits on the wall. Pictures of happier times, of Jasmine's smile before the brutal haircut that would change everything. Marcus closed the curtains firmly. The denial phase was over. Now, the enemy was playing the intimidation game. "They think they can wear us down until we give up," Nicole said, approaching the window. "They don't know who they're dealing with," Marcus replied, checking the lock again. "They think this ends with Jasmine out of school and Ms. Fletcher getting another job. But it won't end like that. It will end with accountability." The concrete walls of the underground parking garage amplified every sound. Nicole Carter startled at each distant echo. The clock showed 11:15 p.m. Harold Jenkins, the janitor at Riverside High School, had insisted on meeting there, 3 floors below ground, where there were no cameras. Nicole recognized his walk before she saw him. Cautious steps, the walk of someone who has learned to live by observing. He emerged from behind a pillar, still in uniform, even though he was away from work. "Mrs. Carter," he murmured, "thank you for coming alone." Harold's eyes moved quickly through the shadows. "They don't know I made a copy." He took a USB drive out of his pocket, holding it firmly. "But they know I saw it. That's why they kept me away." Nicole approached slowly. "What did you see, Mr. Jenkins?" He took a deep breath. "That morning I was cleaning the hallway in front of Professor Diane's classroom. She arrived early, before everyone else. She was waiting." He swallowed hard. When her daughter came in, she grabbed her by the arm. She dragged her inside. The camera caught everything. Then they said the system crashed. "But I've been looking after these cameras for 15 years. They don't crash like that." He held out the flash drive with trembling hands. I copied everything that morning. The video disappeared from the servers, but I have the original. Nicole accepted the flash drive and carefully stored it away. Our lawyer will protect you. No, ma'am, he replied, shaking his head. My wife is sick. I have 3 years left until retirement. They're going to finish me off. But I couldn't sleep knowing what they did to that girl. Before she could answer, footsteps echoed. Harold Jenkins disappeared among the cars as quickly as he had appeared. The following morning, Nicole was in attorney Veronica Sloane's office, watching the recording on an encrypted laptop. The video was grainy, but clear enough. Diane Fletcher, in a blazer, holding Jasmine tightly and pushing her into the room. The aggression was unmistakable. Veronica paused the image. It's authentic. The metadata matches. This proves she planned everything. Can we use this? Nicole asked. Legally, yes. But the moment we use it, they'll know where it came from. Harold will be the first target. Nicole's cell phone vibrated. A news alert. His blood ran cold. Veteran professor sues Carter family for defamation. Veronica opened the article immediately. They acted quickly. The article featured a photo of Diane Fletcher, surrounded by lawyers. My client's 20-year career was destroyed by false accusations, said the lawyer. She suffered irreparable emotional and professional damage. She seeks full compensation. Nicole leaned back in her chair. They want to bankrupt us. Veronica nodded. Classic tactic. Make the truth too expensive to tell. The desk phone vibrated with more calls. And it works. Most families can't handle the legal burden. Nicole took a deep breath. We are not the majority of families. No, but Harold is, Veronica said grimly. They just fired him. Budget cuts. 15 years of service ended with a standard letter. Nicole's cell phone vibrated again. Jasmine's message. Mum, it's all over social media. They're saying I made it all up to get attention. The news reports multiplied. Profiles of the teacher, interviews with emotional former students, headlines praising her dedication and love for education. Nicole looked out the window, watching another car slowly driving by on the street. Rage was boiling, but her voice came out calm. They think they're winning because they're shouting the loudest, but they don't realize that their every move is being recorded. Jasmine upstairs stared at the laptop screen, her eyes fixed on the blinking cursor over the file. Riverside Dossier, Chapter 2, The Evidence They Tried to Erase. The truth was about to emerge, and this time no one would be able to silence it. The comment section was teeming with accusations and theories about Jasmine Carter's past, alleged behavioral problems, difficulties with authority, and a history of rebellion. Each sentence was an attempt to rewrite history, a piece of the narrative carefully crafted to protect them. Late in the afternoon, the dismissal of janitor Harold Jenkins was being used as proof of budget cuts in the school district, the same district that had just hired 3 new administrative assistants. As the sky turned orange, Nicole Carter drove in silence, the heavy flash drive in her bag, cold, small, and carrying the power of truth. But she had already learned, truth alone is not enough. She needs protection, a voice, and above all, the right moment. When he entered the house, he found Jasmine in her room, the curtains drawn to hide the approaching night. The daughter was sitting on the bed, her face illuminated only by the blue light of her cell phone, scrolling through an endless feed of insults. They say I ruined her life, she murmured, that I'm ungrateful, that I made it all up to get attention. Nicole sat down next to her, carefully picking up the phone. What they say doesn't matter. What matters is what we can prove. Mr. Jenkins lost his job because he tried to help us. Jasmine shook her head, her eyes welling with tears. How is that fair? None of this is fair, Nicole replied, hugging her. But now we're not fighting for justice. We're fighting for what's right. Outside, police sirens cut through the silence, flashing red and blue through the windows. Jasmine ran to the curtain and looked. Someone reported Professor Fletcher. They're sending security to protect her. Nicole watched the flashes of the cars driving away and thought of Harold Jenkins, his frightened look in the parking lot, and the flash drive in her bag, the living dangerous truth that she now needed to survive. "Who protects those who tell the truth?" Jasmine asked, letting the curtain fall. Nicole didn't answer. The only response came from a new siren echoing in the distance. The late afternoon sun streamed through the windows of Veronica Sloane's office in the city center. Long shadows stretched across piles of documents, recordings, and legal reports. Nicole and Jasmine were sitting in front of the large monitor, watching the recording for the third time. "Observe her body language," Veronica said, pausing the video. "See how motionless Professor Diane is. She's not reacting to anything. She's waiting, planning." On screen, Diane Fletcher repeatedly glanced at her watch, standing near the classroom door. 7:15 a.m., Veronica confirmed. 45 minutes before the first class. No other teachers had arrived yet. Then, the crucial moment. Jasmine entering the hallway. The teacher leaves, grabs the student's arm, and drags her into the classroom. The force of the pull causes Jasmine to stumble. Veronica paused the video. This is aggression, pure and simple, and it proves that the haircut wasn't an impulse. She was expecting her daughter. For the first time in days, Jasmine smiled, discreetly but genuinely. "They can no longer say that I'm lying." Veronica turned to the computer, her fingers flying across the keyboard. "I'm writing it now. Violation of civil rights, assault against a minor, destruction of evidence, conspiracy to cover up, and this is just the beginning." Nicole looked at her daughter and held her hand. "And what about Harold?" "We'll protect him," Veronica replied. "But his testimony, along with those images, they can't escape this." The office phone rang. Veronica answered. "Yes, it's me. We have the documentation." A pause. "We appreciate the support." He hung up and smiled. "The National Alliance for Educational Justice wants to get involved. They handle cases exactly like this." "What does that mean?" Jasmine asked with cautious hope. "Resources, media coverage, public pressure. From now on, the case is no longer just theirs. It belongs to the whole country." Veronica's cell phone vibrated again, this time with dozens of notifications. She opened the app and raised her eyebrows. "It's already started. Someone leaked an image from the video. It's trending on X." Nicole picked up her own cell phone. The image, the moment when Diane violently grabs Jasmine's arm, was already everywhere. The comments multiplied. "She did the same to me in 2019. I was transferred after complaining about her. Finally, someone had the courage to show what happens." The teacher's supporters tried to deny it, calling the video a montage. But Veronica just smiled. "Let them talk. We have the original, with the metadata. Every denial only buries them deeper." Night was falling. In the office, lit only by screens and cold coffee, the three women planned their next steps. Veronica made calls, drafted petitions, and coordinated journalists. Nicole was reviewing documents while Jasmine watched the cursor blinking on her laptop screen. And, for the first time since the beginning, the truth was no longer alone. She had a voice. It had a face, and he was about to set the country on fire. The National Alliance for Educational Justice had finally submitted the preliminary documentation. For the first time since the start of the battle, the process seemed to be gaining real momentum. "Get some rest," Veronica Sloane said, exhausted as she ended the video call. "Tomorrow we'll start the real counterattack." At home, the atmosphere was different. Jasmine was finally having dinner, her appetite slowly returning. Nicole watched her husband, Judge Marcus Carter, almost smiling as he reviewed the lawyer's documents. The weight that had suffocated that house for weeks seemed to have lessened. as if the truth had materialized there, clearing the air, purifying the rooms. "Maybe we'll be able to sleep tonight," Nicole said, already closing the curtains. But the rest was short-lived. At 4:47 a.m., Marcus's cell phone vibrated on the nightstand. An email, subject line in bold, "Emergency. Check your inbox immediately." He went down to the office, opened his laptop and read in silence. "Dear Judge Carter, it is with deep regret that I inform you of my immediate withdrawal as legal representative in your daughter's case. Although I continue to believe in the merits of the action, circumstances beyond my control have made it impossible to proceed. The firm's executive committee informed me that several important clients have threatened to terminate contracts if the process continues. The financial impact would imply mass layoffs. I sincerely apologize. All documents are ready for transfer. With respect and gratitude, Veronica Sloan." The first ray of sunlight streamed through the window and fell onto the table. The same light that yesterday seemed like hope now seemed harsh, merciless. Nicole appeared at the door. What there was. Marcus turned the screen towards her. Her expression hardened. "They threatened Veronica's clients," she murmured. "They're going after those who help us." Marcus took a deep breath. "An old tactic. Attack the lawyer's income, not the case. Make justice too expensive to pursue." "And now?" Nicole asked, her voice almost a whisper. The pendulum clock struck 6, the chimes sounding like blows. Outside, the birds sang, oblivious to the machinery that ground up truth within silent houses. The morning light bathed everything, but it brought no comfort. Only the cruel reminder that truth alone is never enough when power is used as a shield. The grey sky hung over the Alternative Learning Center, the cracked concrete reflecting the late afternoon dampness. Jasmine Carter waited for the bus, shifting her weight from one foot to the other. The backpack weighed as much as armor. 3:47 p.m. There were 13 minutes left until the bus. A sharp laugh cut through the air. Jasmine looked up and saw Paige Morrison, daughter of the leader of the Parents in Defense of Professor Fletcher group, approaching with 2 classmates from Riverside High School. The cell phones were already ready, the eyes and weapons of a digital lynching about to begin. "Look who decided to show up," Paige said, in that sweet, venomous tone that only someone who rehearses cruelty possesses. "The girl who destroys lives to get on TV." Jasmine took a step back, her heart racing. The place was empty. No employees, no security guards. "I don't want any trouble," he murmured. "Oh, you don't want to," Paige mocked. "But you got Professor Fletcher fired. My mother says you lied because you don't know how to obey." Jasmine raised her chin. "She cut my hair." "She barely touched you," the other replied, stepping forward. Jasmine tried to move away, but the three formed a semicircle. She had to play the victim, didn't she? She had to involve her judge father. Jasmine glanced over her shoulder toward the building. No movement, no help. "I'm leaving." The shove came from behind, sharp, violent. His body lifted off the ground before the asphalt tore through his hands and knees. The backpack flew off. Before he could react, the first punch hit his shoulder. Another one came in the ribs. Hands grabbed her by the hair, pulling her back to the ground. The girl's screams mingled with the sound of distant cars. One of the cell phones was recording, the other was mocking. And amidst the chaos and pain, Jasmine realized that the video that had once set her free would now be used against her. Once again, the power of images in the wrong hands. Amid the chaos, cell phones were raised in a circle of curious faces, recording everything and helping in no way. "You're not so brave now, are you?" Paige Morrison yelled, her voice trembling with cruel excitement. "Where's Daddy the judge to save you?" Someone snatched Jasmine's backpack, scattering its contents across the wet sidewalk. Papers flew, the notebook fell and was crushed by dirty sneakers, the cover tearing on the concrete. A kick struck her side, knocking the air out of her. Jasmine cowered, shielding her face. The cold concrete scratched her cheek. The blood throbbed in my ears, muffling laughter and screams, almost. Then distant sirens cut through the sound of the aggression. The circle of cell phones swayed, then dispersed, hurried footsteps echoing down the street. Jasmine lay there, her body trembling, her lungs burning, struggling to breathe. "Everyone stop!" thundered a male voice. "Get away from her now!" Blue and red lights flashed on the wet asphalt, reflecting in the shop windows. Vehicle doors opened. Several police officers approached. "Miss, can you sit down? Are you all right?" one of them asked, kneeling down. Jasmine knelt down, her hands leaving bloody marks on the floor. "I need your full name and ID. Are you a student here? Do you have a history of fighting?" "She's the victim," protested a voice in the crowd. "I need to investigate the facts," the policeman replied, flipping through his notebook. "There are records of previous warnings." "Oh, that's my daughter!" shouted Nicole Carter, breaking through the isolation line. She knelt beside Jasmine, her face consumed by fury. "Look at her. Look at her face. Where were you when you attacked her? Madam, please, no, we're done here." Nicole put her arm around her daughter's shoulders. "Let's go to the hospital. I want a medical report now." The cold, white lights of Memorial Hospital illuminated each bruise. Jasmine was sitting on a sheet of paper, an ice pack resting on her swollen cheek, sore ribs, raw palms, cut lip, possible concussion. The nurse was taking notes while a police officer stood at the door, turning questions into accusations. "Are you sure you didn't start the fight? That's enough." Marcus Carter's deep, authoritative voice echoed through the room. He entered with a firm stance, his toga replaced by a crumpled shirt, but the weight of authority followed him. The police officer straightened up immediately. "Your Honor, you can leave." The word carried the weight of the state. The police officer backed down, leaving the report incomplete. Marcus approached his daughter with short, measured steps. He took Jasmine's injured hand, her fingers trembling under his touch. "Dad." "I tried to leave. I know, my love. I know you tried." His fist clenched. Through the window, twilight tinged the sky with lilac and grey. On the television in the waiting room, the official statement from the school district appeared. "Isolated incident between female students, unrelated to previous occurrences or personal matters." Marcus stared at the headline with his jaw clenched. She looked at her daughter's face, at Nicole's tears, and spoke in a low but firm tone. "This ends now." The sound of the heart monitors filled the silence. The world went on outside, cars, horns, light rain, but inside that room, something irreversible had changed. An invisible line had been crossed. The patience of a just man had run out forever. The thunder shook the windows of the Carter house, making the glass vibrate in its frames. The heavy rain drummed on the roof, mingling with the echoes of suppressed anger. Jasmine was curled up on the sofa, her homework untouched on her lap. The bruises were already taking on unsightly shades of green and purple. Nicole paced back and forth, constantly glancing out the window. Judge Marcus Carter was standing at his desk, sorting through mail. His fingers stopped when he touched an envelope with no return address. The paper was thick, expensive, official. He opened it cautiously. The silence in the room was almost absolute, broken only by the distant ticking of the clock. Marcus's expression changed as he read. The rain intensified. From across the room, Nicole asked without moving, "What is that?" The judge looked up, his voice firm and somber. "It's not a threat. It's a warning." And for the first time, Nicole realized the storm outside was nothing compared to the one that was about to begin inside that house. The envelope was thick, heavy, expensive, the kind of paper that carries threats with elegance. Inside, the typed words flowed like acid. "Back off now. You can't protect her forever." Nicole Carter noticed the change in her husband's expression. Other? Marcus nodded silently, adding the letter to the other 17 he had collected that week. Some were crude, poorly written, but others, like this one, had the precision of someone who knows what they're doing. "Harold's cell phone is turned off," Nicole said, setting the device down on the table. The building's superintendent confirmed. He moved out 3 days ago. No destination address given. The disappearance of caretaker Harold Jenkins, the whistleblower who had saved the original recordings, was not a surprise, but it still hurt like a betrayal of fate. He was the only living witness with direct evidence of the attack and the manipulation of the cameras. Now he had disappeared, like all those who dared to help. Jasmine was watching from the window. The press van has left. They came every day last week. She was right. Media coverage had dried up, drained by new scandals. The story of the girl who was raped with scissors and humiliated on national television was now just another forgotten case. A lightning bolt ripped across the sky, and for a moment the room lit up. In the brief, sharp light, Marcus saw his daughter's cracked lip, the newly formed scars. He clutched the paper tightly in his hand. Professor Fletcher's lawsuit was filed today. His voice was controlled but cold. "She's asking for $10 million in damages." Nicole stopped in the middle of the room. How could she do that? "Because she understands the system," Marcus replied. "She knows how to play the victim, and she has powerful people behind her." The thunder rumbled and the lights in the house flickered, barely surviving. Jasmine lowered her eyes. "Maybe if I had stayed quiet, if I had pretended nothing happened." Nicole went over to her, kneeling down in front of the sofa. "No, my love. You're not going to carry that guilt." Marcus approached and added, "Your mother is right, but things need to change now. I'm stepping away from the public fight." Nicole straightened up, her voice cutting through the air. "Like this? They're trying to disqualify me from the position. If I keep talking, they'll succeed. Now is the time to be strategic." The rain intensified, beating against the windows like impatient fingers. Jasmine lifted her face, her eyes welling with tears. "So are we going to give up?" Marcus knelt before her. "Listen carefully. Justice isn't about who shouts the loudest. Sometimes it's about who knows how to wait in silence." Nicole's eyes met his, slowly understanding. "What are you planning?" "I can't say everything. But remember, federal investigators or the FBI don't announce what they do. They work in the dark until the right moment." The lightning illuminated the room once more, revealing tired yet determined faces. Marcus explained what he could. Secret warrants circulating discreetly, evidence being filed in secure systems, a process unfolding without headlines, but with surgical precision. "And what about the Fletcher case?" Nicole asked. "Let them think they've won," Marcus replied with calculated calm. "Arrogance is the prelude to ruin." Jasmine touched her healed lip. "How long are we going to wait?" "As long as it takes," the father replied. "Justice is slow, but when it moves, it's unstoppable." The rain began to weaken, creeping like a whisper across the rooftops. The room was bathed in dim light. Nicole gathered the threatening letters, stacking them methodically on the table. Jasmine closed the book she hadn't been able to read. "I'm scared," she confessed softly. Marcus smiled slightly. "Great. Fear keeps us alive. But never let it paralyze you." He stood up and walked over to the light switch. The last light went out. In the darkness, his voice echoed, firm, calm, relentless. "They think it's over." The federal court of the Southern District rose against the sky before dawn, its light, cold stone facade reflecting the pale blue of the morning. Judge Marcus Carter drove the car to the underground garage, where shadows stretched between damp pillars. He checked his rearview mirror twice before parking in the reserved spot. On the passenger seat, a black folder, sealed, numbered, marked with the seal of the federal court. The clock showed 5:56 a.m. The silent war had finally begun. The echo of Marcus Carter's footsteps reverberated through the underground parking garage of the Southern District Federal Court, each sound mingling with the distant hum of fluorescent lights. At that hour, shortly before 6 in the morning, the place was almost empty. Only cars belonging to the cleaning crew and the archivists on the first shift, the perfect setting for conversations that shouldn't be on official agendas. Two figures stood out from the shadows cast by a concrete column. A tall woman with short grey hair and a young man with a well-worn leather briefcase. Neither of them was wearing visible badges or FBI jackets. "Judge Carter," the woman greeted in a low voice. "I'm Special Agent Rachel Blackwood, Civil Rights Division." "This is Special Agent David Santos," Marcus responded with a brief nod and led them to a windowless meeting room booked under another name. Lights hummed on the ceiling as Santos opened the folder and carefully spread documents out on the table. "We've been putting this case together for 3 weeks," Rachel began, sitting down with a firm posture, "and what we've discovered goes far beyond a simple act of school bullying." Marcus crossed his arms, his voice muffled by the discipline of a judge. "Tell me what you have." Santos pointed to the sheets of paper with a pencil. "Tampering with evidence. Intentional deletion of images, intimidation of witnesses, 5 years of systematic harassment against minority students with the knowledge of the administration." "Professor Diane Fletcher?" Marcus asked. "Central figure, but not the only one," Rachel replied. "Principal Carolyn Brooks authorized the destruction of the records. The regional coordinator altered reports to justify cutting her daughter's hair. And the school board aligned public statements with the teacher's lawyer." Marcus leaned forward. "A conspiracy." "Exactly." Santos opened a second folder filled with spreadsheets and bank records. We have evidence of misappropriation of federal funds, misuse of educational funds, and retaliation against students and staff who reported irregularities." "And Harold Jenkins?" Marcus asked, his voice heavy with apprehension. Rachel replied calmly, "He is safe. He has been relocated to another state. His testimony was recorded and authenticated. The meeting lasted for more than an hour. The three spoke in low, precise tones, while Marcus absorbed every detail with the serenity of a magistrate and the silent anger of a father. The case was devastating, not just against Diane Fletcher, but against the entire power network that sustained her silence. "We'll need another 24 hours of absolute secrecy," Rachel said, gathering the documents. "The subpoenas are ready, but the timing of the execution is crucial." "They're nervous," Santos added. "They called an emergency meeting of the school board, a classic reaction from someone who senses a collapse." Marcus stood up, putting on his jacket. "How many prisons?" 7 in the first phase, Rachel replied. "Others will follow as the financial transactions are cross-referenced." When they left the room, the parking lot was already starting to fill up with employees arriving early. The agents disappeared among the cars, leaving no trace of the meeting. At home, Nicole Carter was in the kitchen, her coffee already cold in her hands. "The calls stopped," she said bluntly. "No threats, no blocked numbers, total silence." Marcus loosened his tie. "They're testing the waters. They want to see which way the wind is blowing now." He took a sip of coffee and murmured, "Rats always know when to abandon ship." Upstairs, Jasmine was attending her online class. The program at the Alternative Learning Center was basic, almost punitive, but she maintained her focus. Each task solved as if it were an act of resistance. Nicole looked at the photo of her daughter still stuck to the refrigerator, her smile frozen under a nearly faded purple mark. "She's stronger than I was at her age." "She's stronger than a lot of adults," Marcus said, "but she shouldn't have to be." The day dragged on, dense as the air before a storm. At 2 o'clock in the afternoon, Nicole's cell phone vibrated. A last-minute notification. Riverside High School Board announces emergency public meeting tomorrow at 7 p.m. Marcus read the statement carefully, analyzing each word. They are terrified. They know something is coming, but they don't know from where. "Should we go?" Nicole asked. "We will," he replied firmly. "They wanted Jasmine to be invisible. Tomorrow, she'll be the only thing everyone sees." Later, Marcus found her in her room, sitting in front of her laptop with the camera turned off. The bruises had turned into yellowish shadows, but his eyes, hard, calm, no longer held fear. They carried a purpose. "The school board will meet tomorrow," said Marcus Carter, in the calm tone of someone who has already made up his mind. "We need to be there." Jasmine looked up, surprised. "Why bother? They've never listened to me before, because this time they have no choice." He sat on the edge of his daughter's bed, watching her reflection in the soft light of the bedside lamp. "I need you to be ready to be seen again. Can you do that?" Jasmine's chin slowly lifted, the same gesture of resistance that so irritated Diane Fletcher. "With you. It won't be easy," he warned. "There will be cameras, there will be angry people, there will be noise." "Great," she replied firmly. "I want them to see me, to really see me." Night fell upon the Carter household like a stifled sigh. Nicole spread out on the table the documents she had gathered over months. Emails, medical reports, testimonies, and photos. Jasmine ironed the navy blue dress she had worn to her father's inauguration ceremony, a symbol of pride, not fear. Shortly before midnight, Marcus's cell phone vibrated, a short message from Agent Rachel Blackwood. He replied with a single word: "Tomorrow." The auditorium at Riverside High School was buzzing even before the clock struck 7. Hundreds of people packed into the old hall. The air was thick, the heat unbearable, the tension almost palpable. The film crews squeezed along the walls, their white lights casting harsh shadows on anxious faces. On stage, a long wooden table accommodated the council members, all seated with the rigidity of those afraid to move. Stacks of papers neatly aligned in front, faces feigning neutrality. Director Kenneth Walsh approached the podium, tugging at the collar with damp fingers. The declaration in his hands trembled almost as much as his voice. "We are here today, in a spirit of dialogue and rebuilding," he began. "We know that recent events have shaken the community's confidence. As educators, we recognize that mistakes have been made and we must seek solutions that promote collective well-being." A subdued murmur ran through the audience, heavy with skepticism. Walsh continued, sticking to the script. "We are reviewing our internal policies and implementing new awareness training programs. Our commitment is to maintain a safe and respectful environment for all students." Each word seemed rehearsed, sterile, carefully empty. Suddenly, the side door opened. A murmur swept through the auditorium. Professor Diane Fletcher entered as if she were on a catwalk, designer beige suit, sturdy heels, a calculated gaze. 3 union lawyers followed her, briefcases in hand, forming a legal honor guard. She lifted her chin as she crossed the hall, receiving knowing touches and supportive glances from some of the parents. He had the triumphant air of someone who believed he had won. Outside, the protests echoed under the light rain. "Justice for Jasmine! Fire Fletcher now!" The security guards fidgeted at each entrance, alert, as the main doors opened again. An almost reverent silence fell over the auditorium. Jasmine Carter stepped between the parents. The navy blue dress contrasted sharply with the pale TV lights. Her disheveled hair, deliberately styled to show off the flaws in the haircut, didn't hide the trauma. It displayed the proof. Nicole shook his hand. Marcus kept his face impassive, his jaw rigid, as Fletcher's eyes met his in a cold, sly smile. They sat down in the middle of the hall. Some parents looked at them with disdain, others looked away, as if afraid to see themselves reflected. "We will now open the audience comments," Walsh announced, his voice uncertain. "We ask for respect and objectivity." The first speaker, Jennifer Harrison, walked up to the microphone. Branded sportswear, arrogant posture. "I've known Professor Fletcher for 8 years, a brilliant educator who inspires her students to achieve their best. This absurd persecution is destroying the reputation of a dedicated woman." She looked directly at Jasmine. "Some people simply don't know how to accept no for an answer." Applause erupted from a group in the corner. Jasmine remained motionless. Other parents followed, their voices overlapping, each speech more aggressive than the last. "My daughter said that Jasmine has always been rebellious. If you don't obey the rules, there are consequences. These accusations are driven by self-interest and vanity." Marcus Carter was still seated, his hands firmly clasped, his gaze fixed and neutral, the serenity of a judge masking the fury of a father. His knuckles were white, but he didn't move. Walsh tried to intervene. "Order, please. Let's maintain composure." But the unrest was growing. "My taxes aren't for funding criminals," shouted a man in the back. The security guards advanced. 2 women were arguing, fingers pointed, faces flushed. The air in the auditorium was heavy, electric, on the verge of collapse. Fletcher's lead lawyer stood up, his voice deliberately solemn. "My client suffered severe emotional distress and irreparable damage to her image. We are taking all legal measures against the defamatory accusations made by the Carter family." The audience reacted with mixed murmurs, indignation and applause mingling in a chaotic noise. And it was at that moment, amidst the chaos, that Marcus Carter slowly rose from his chair. The chorus of protests outside grew like a wave about to break through the gates of Riverside High School. Inside the auditorium, the parents' voices had ceased to be arguments. They were now shouts divided between accusations and hysterical defenses. "This is ridiculous. Let Professor Fletcher speak. And what about Jasmine's rights? Go back to your schools and stop playing the victim." Director Kenneth Walsh gripped the microphone with sweaty hands, his breath short, his wooden baton trembling. The security guards exchanged urgent messages over the radios, trying to contain the seething crowd. Suddenly, a man in the front row stood up, pointing his finger toward the center of the room. "Look at him," he shouted, his voice thick with resentment. "The judge who thinks he's better than everyone else. Does he think that robe makes him untouchable?" Marcus Carter did not respond. Seated, his face impassive, his shoulders firm, he stared at the man as one faces an inevitable sentence. Jasmine gripped her father's arm, tense. "Hey, I'm talking to you!" the man roared, taking a step forward. Others rose, echoing Marcus's name as if it were a curse. The room vibrated with a contained violence, ready to explode. From the stage, Diane Fletcher watched everything with a satisfied glint in her eyes. The cameras were shaking, trying to keep up with the chaos. Nicole Carter approached her daughter, her maternal instincts on high alert. "Traitor to your own people," someone shouted, the insult cutting through the air like a blade. Another one shouted, "They want to destroy the good teachers in this country." The silence lasted for half a second, and then the room exploded. Chairs were dragged, screams echoed, and security lost control. And at the center of it all, the Carters remained seated. 3 islands of dignity, surrounded by a sea of hatred. Marcus's hand rested firmly on Jasmine's, protective. But before he could react, a burly man, red face, bulging veins, stood up at the back of the auditorium. "This ends now," he yelled, charging toward the judge. The fist came like a bolt of lightning, striking Marcus's chin with a sharp crack that reverberated throughout the hall. The judge staggered but did not fall. Blood trickled slowly from his cut lip as he straightened up. "Is that all you've got?" he murmured, wiping his mouth with his sleeve. The man roared and charged forward again, blinded by hatred. This time Marcus dodged with precision, causing the attacker to stumble on his own momentum and collide with the chairs. People screamed, trying to escape. "Everyone step back," shouted a security guard. But it was too late. The room descended into total chaos. Nicole hugged Jasmine, shielding her with her own body as people pushed and shoved each other and ran. "Mom, we need to help Dad." "Your father knows how to defend himself," Nicole replied, her voice firm, but her eyes fixed on him. Marcus raised his fists, not like an aggressor, but like a seasoned fighter protecting his own family. He blocked the first blow, felt the second in his ribs, and responded to the third with a precise punch that sent the attacker staggering backward. "Get him!" someone shouted. "Show that judge what we think of his justice system." The security guards fought in vain. For every person held back too advanced, dozens of cell phones were raised, recording the scene as a trophy. On stage, Kenneth Walsh cowered behind the podium, frantically pressing the panic button. The council members fled through the back rooms. Only Diane Fletcher remained seated, her face motionless, savoring the collapse she herself had brought about. Marcus moved with surgical precision. He didn't fight, he controlled. Every movement was measured, economical, the result of years of discipline. When a chair flew past inches from his head, he ducked without losing focus. "You arrogant judge! You think you're better than us!" shouted a woman covered in jewels, throwing her purse at him. The impact ricocheted off Marcus's shoulder, who blocked another punch coming from the side. Nicole held Jasmine against the wall, her body serving as a shield. Neutral parents were now divided into factions, shouting against each other. "That's what happens when you challenge the system," exclaimed Diane Fletcher, her voice echoing above the shouting. But it was too late. The breaking point had been reached. The security guards finally caught up with Marcus, trying to pull him away from the attackers, but the violence was already spreading like wildfire. Near the entrance, the protesters outside forced their way through. The two crowds clashed, furious parents, teachers, reporters, activists, a storm of anger and accusations. "You cowardly racists! Go back to where you came from. Justice for Jasmine." The floor was covered in papers, bags, and pieces of chairs. A trash can flew out, hitting the wall. And then the fire alarm went off. A high-pitched, maddening sound that mingled with the screams and the rain falling outside. A scene of utter chaos filled the auditorium. But amidst the chaos, three figures remained united: Marcus, Nicole, and Jasmine Carter, side by side, standing firm in the eye of the storm that the entire country would see in the headlines the following morning. Throughout the commotion, the cell phones continued recording. Live streams flooded social media, showing every punch, every insult, every mask of civility shattering before the cameras. It was no longer a school meeting. It was a stark portrait of the United States, laid bare in a public auditorium, where the deepest wounds of inequality and prejudice bled openly. Marcus Carter was making his way through the chaos to reach Nicole and Jasmine, while the security guards tried to form a protective circle. His suit was torn, the collar stained with blood, but his gaze was firm, a silent, controlled fury. "Let's get out of here," he said, tugging at his daughter's arm. Before they could take a step, a voice thundered, "Nobody's going anywhere." The first attacker had returned, his face purple with hatred and exhaustion. He attacked again, and with him others who fed on the same poison. Marcus met him head-on, his firm fist striking the man's nose in a swift blow that splattered blood into the air. Another came from behind. Marcus turned his body, unbalancing him with surgical precision. Years of martial discipline and self-control against a mob driven by fury. "Dad!" Jasmine shouted, seeing three figures advancing as one. Outside, sirens approached, the sound growing until it filled the auditorium. Red and blue lights streamed through the windows, reflecting off panicked faces. But the fight had already lost its form. It was a mass of bodies and screams, a whirlwind out of control. That's when Diane Fletcher stood up. For the first time, fear replaced disdain. She gathered her lawyers, trying to reach the side exit, but before she could touch the doorknob, the door slammed open. At the same time, the main doors swung open. The sound of boots echoed on the linoleum floor, firm, rhythmic, cutting through the noise with authority. "Everyone on the ground, now!" shouted a trained voice. Golden badges gleamed under the fluorescent lights, dark blue jackets, yellow lettering. FBI. The weapons remained in their holsters, but hands on them were sufficient. The effect was immediate. Chaos turned to silence, the heavy air of adrenaline being replaced by a collective chilling fear. "Hands where we can see them," echoed the command. One by one, those present knelt down, their cell phones still recording, now pointed at the floor. Marcus stood for a moment, blood trickling down his lip, until he recognized Agent Rachel Blackwood's steady gaze among the other agents. She nodded slightly. Only then did he crouch down, keeping Nicole and Jasmine safely by his side. Near the exit, Diane Fletcher froze. His once proud face now trembled. The escape route was blocked, the agent's eyes fixed on it. His expression crumbled when he realized it wasn't a coincidence. The net was closing in. "Everyone calm down. This is a federal investigation," Rachel announced, her voice sharp. The fire alarm was still ringing, shrill, mixing with the metallic sound of handcuffs and crackling radios. Outside, FBI and press vehicles formed a line of flashing lights on the street. Inside, the auditorium was filled with silence. Only the rhythmic clicking of the handcuffs echoed amidst the echoes of chaos. The officers moved with military precision, separating those involved, identifying the wounded, and detaining the most violent individuals. When the alarm finally stopped, the emptiness that remained was deafening. Kenneth Walsh was still standing behind the podium, his face bathed in sweat. Two officers approached him. "Kenneth Walsh, you are under arrest for conspiracy against civil rights, tampering with evidence, and criminal coordination." The sound of the handcuffs snapping shut echoed loud and clear. "That's absurd," he stammered. "I was just following protocol." An officer held up a tablet displaying official emails from the school district. "Protocol? Is that what you call ordering the deletion of security recordings?" Another added, "And to coordinate false reports to protect Professor Fletcher." A regional administrator tried to escape through the side entrance, but found the door blocked. More handcuffs, more charges, conspiracy, tampering with evidence, retaliation against a minor. Diane Fletcher remained still, her eyes fixed on the opposite wall, as if refusing to accept reality. Their union lawyers walked away slowly, in silence. "Professor Diane Fletcher," said Agent Blackwood firmly, "you are under arrest for assault of a minor, conspiracy to obstruct justice, and violation of civil rights." "You can't do this," she whispered, trembling. "I'm the victim here. That girl provoked me." Another agent approached with a laptop connected to the auditorium's projector. The screen illuminated the room with a cutting coldness. Clear images appeared. The hallway at Riverside High School, minutes before class. Jasmine Carter walking calmly into the room, and then Diane Fletcher. She grabs his arm brutally. The words were inaudible, but the hostility was written in every gesture. Jasmine tries to walk away, respectfully, calmly, and at that moment, the whole room saw what had really happened. There was no doubt, no version, no argument. The truth, finally, was laid out for all to see. The images continued to be shown. Months of persecution, unjustified searches, provocations, and silent humiliations. Each image revealed the coldness of a system that preferred to silence the victim rather than confront the truth. Sighs echoed through the auditorium at Riverside High School. Parents who had been shouting minutes before were now sitting motionless on the floor, staring at the screen as if gazing into a painful mirror. The cameras were broken, murmured Diane Fletcher, collapsing into a chair. Her meticulously combed hair now fell in disheveled strands, making her look smaller, defeated, aged. "Federal investigators don't lose evidence," said Agent Rachel Blackwood coldly. "We found them all." New recordings appeared on screen. Kenneth Walsh ordering the janitor to delete files, a district coordinator destroying documents at night, Diane Fletcher meeting with professors, coordinating versions of testimonies, months of orchestrated persecution now exposed in high definition. Judge Marcus Carter stood up slowly. The dried blood on his lip contrasted with the restrained strength in his voice. "The United States Constitution guarantees equality before the law," he began, each word weighing heavily in the air. "It prohibits discrimination. It demands accountability. No anger, no pride, just the naked truth upheld by the law. When those to whom we entrust the education of our children abuse that power, when they lie, conspire, and destroy evidence to protect their mistakes, they will face the consequences." Jasmine was beside him, chin held high, the same unwavering gaze that had once silently confronted her fear, no longer a victim, a symbol of dignity. Nicole joined the two of them, the family side by side, facing a system that crumbled under the weight of the truth. FBI agents walked in and out of the hallways, carrying boxes of seized documents. Outside, the red and blue lights of the police cars reflected off the broken windows. News crews were already gathering, broadcasting live coverage of the ongoing arrests. "This is not an isolated incident," Marcus continued. "It's a pattern, a reflection of institutional protection of prejudice, of power used to hurt, not to educate." Kenneth Walsh was led away in handcuffs, head bowed, suit crumpled. Behind him, the district administrator crying as he listened to the accusations. Other teachers, silent accomplices, watched petrified, wondering if they would be next. Diane Fletcher struggled as the officers held her by the arms. His wavering voice broke the silence. "You don't understand. This girl needed to learn respect. I was just maintaining standards." Jasmine gazed at her serenely. "Standards of what?" she asked calmly. "Of hate? Of fear? You taught me nothing, except how small power can be when it is unjust." The union lawyers discreetly withdrew, already on the phone, abandoning their former protégé. The abusive parents were handcuffed and formally charged. Social media was exploding. Within minutes, hashtags like "Die Justice for Jasmine" and "Die Education Reform Now" dominated the trending topics. The videos of the fight, once symbols of scandal, were now living proof of a failed system being exposed. By midnight, national news channels were already broadcasting the case, not as a school dispute, but as a historical landmark of accountability and justice. A spokesperson for the school district rushed in, his tie crooked, papers trembling in his hands. "The board of directors has been dissolved. An independent committee will take over until the investigations are complete." But his words barely drowned out the sounds of police radios and the sealing of evidence boxes. Marcus placed a gentle hand on Jasmine's shoulder, ready to go home. She nodded, exhausted but at peace. They left together, Marcus, Nicole, and Jasmine, under the flashing lights of the police cars. They passed by Diane Fletcher, who was being led away in handcuffs, and Kenneth Walsh, who was looking dejected in the back seat of another police car. The system that tried to destroy them was now being judged under the same rules it had manipulated. The press cameras turned to them. Questions were shouted, but the Carter family remained silent. They let the truth speak for itself. They let the justice system do the rest. The morning sun streamed through Jasmine's bedroom window, painting golden streaks across her desk. There, next to a new school backpack, was a glass case. Inside it, a lock of hair and the official document of the court settlement. Not as a reminder of the pain, but as proof of resilience. Her natural hair grew strong, the curls gleaming in the light. "Ready, daughter?" Nicole called from downstairs. Almost, Jasmine replied, adjusting the dark purple blouse she had chosen herself. Westbrook Academy had awarded him a full scholarship after reviewing his case. The principal apologized in person. The approved reforms created an office to defend student rights with independent lawyers and supervisors. For the first time, justice had roots in the classroom. In the kitchen, Nicole prepared her usual snack with extra cookies, the ritual of the first days of school. But there was something different about that gesture. The confidence of someone who has won. "Did you see the news?" he asked, showing her his cell phone. The headline read, "Former teacher Diane Fletcher resigns from leave and loses retirement benefits after court settlement." Below, a photo showed Diane, disheveled in simple clothes, a stark contrast to an inevitable fall. "Walsh's sentence will be handed down next week," Nicole said. "The prosecutors asked for the maximum sentence." Jasmine simply nodded. "I knew that the evidence, the emails, the recordings had spoken for themselves. Has Dad already been to court?" "Yes," Nicole replied. "His schedule is full. After all, his voice carries double the weight." Marcus Carter, now back in his position as a federal judge, was celebrated as a symbol of quiet courage, proof that the law, when used intelligently, is more powerful than any revenge. Nicole looked at her daughter. "When you were born, I promised to protect you, but I've realized something in these past months." "What?" Jasmine asked. "You never needed protection, just space to be who you are." She smiled. "And who you are, my daughter, is magnificent." Jasmine hugged her tightly. She remembered the fear, the shame, the anger, and how her parents transformed pain into strategy, despair into dignity. The doorbell rang. The new study group was waiting for her outside. Nicole adjusted the collar of her daughter's blouse. "Your father wants to celebrate tonight at the same restaurant. They're already calling it the judge's table." They both laughed. Jasmine grabbed her backpack and looked at herself in the entryway mirror. There, he saw more than a reflection. He saw identity, strength, and moral heritage. The money from the settlement remained untouched. The Carters weren't seeking profit, they were seeking change. "Ready?" Nicole asked, holding the door open. Jasmine took a deep breath. "Ready." He went out into the sunlight. The sound of friends chatting awaited her at the gate. Head held high, firm steps, without fear, without needing to look back. And when the door closed behind her, it felt like the end of a cycle and the beginning of a new story. If this story touched you, leave a comment saying which city or country you are watching from. Your support is important. Like the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications to follow future stories. Each new registration helps keep alive the message of courage, justice, and dignity that we share here.